Hello, my name is Kinlock and I really like musical theatre. I go see musicals and then I have lots of thoughts and I need to share them, just spit them out into the world. Hopefully that's why you're here. You want to hear my thoughts on musical theatre. In this case, it's Miss Saigon. Yes, we are discussing Miss Saigon and I have so many thoughts. This could be a long one. I hardly know how to begin. I'm going to start with what I love about Miss Saigon. When I think about Miss Saigon, I think of really dramatic music, these songs with really high stakes, and just like so much belting, kind of screaming, and just these really like people who are so serious and in these real serious moments, and you just kind of have to take them seriously, and everything is so kind of, you're just sort of almost on edge with how like dramatic everything is, and the music is beautiful. So that's what I was looking for when I went to see this show. And I didn't quite get that, but I want to kind of break it down into sort of different areas, things that worked, things that didn't work, how much of what didn't work was because of this production, how much of what didn't work was because of the material, and should we just never put the show on again? My mind has sort of flip-flopped back and forth between a few positions over the course of the week or so since I saw the show, and only now feel like I finally have an outcome that I can kind of share. So I'm going to start with how the show opens, which is basically in this brothel in Vietnam, and there's this young, innocent 17-year-old girl who's new there, and this pimp kind of guy who gets called the engineer. He has brought her in and wants to, like, induct her into this world. And so we're seeing all these sex workers showing off their bodies and being very like, woo, come on boys, come get me, showing themselves off. And they look like they're having a great time. And then we've got all these US soldiers who are there to like buy a girl and get their rocks off. And they look like they're having a great time. They're snorting cocaine, they're drinking, they're touching inappropriately. And then we have this moment where one of the sex workers sings the song called Movie in My Mind. And it's about how, when she's engaging with a guy, she kind of has to emotionally check out and play this like movie in her mind, which is her kind of detaching from reality and living in this fantasy just to kind of get through this. And it's so heartbreaking. And yet, the action on stage around her at this point is all these other like couples hooking up and stuff. And they don't look like they're portraying this emotionally checked out kind of movie in my mind scenario. These girls look like they're really into it. And the guys seem to be like acting in a loving, gentle way. And it was really uncomfortable because some of the staging was quite graphic. Some of these couples were like, oh gosh, okay, yep. But also they looked like they were portraying kind of consensual relationships, and that's not the vibe. That's not what we're supposed to be establishing. That's not what the song is about. And so there was this mismatch. The tone was wrong. It was very uncomfortable. And then we hook back into this young girl who is there for the first time, and her name is Kim. We learn she's only 17. And this is also just like, ugh, cool. I know what's about to happen next. And she's only 17. Ugh. So what happens next is she gets introduced to this American GI, Chris. And Chris is like the good guy. He's like, oh, no, I don't want to get high and get laid. I don't do that anymore. I am gonna just be good and stuff. But he sort of realizes that he's been paired up with this girl and someone else has paid for them to go and spend a night together, and he doesn't really want to, but it's gonna make her life more difficult if he doesn't. because the engineer is watching everything, and it's basically like Kim's chance to prove that it's like a job interview. If she screws this up, then she won't have a job. So Chris is like, okay, fine, we'll go off into this room. So they go off into this room, and you think, oh, well, at least he's a good guy. At least they might just have a little sleepover, you know, play with each other's hair, you know, tell some jokes. No, as soon as they get into this little room, they take off their clothes and they start making out. And it's like, oh, but I thought he was one of the, oh, Chris, boys will be boys. But it's just kind of, it may be realistic, but it doesn't set up that he's a good guy, and it doesn't set up that this connection between the two of them is a real thing that we should care about. It doesn't set up that it's romance. It just sets up that it's a hookup. And that kind of defeats the rest of the story, unfortunately. A lot of what is to come involves, well, I don't think involves is quite the right word, but sort of hinges on the fact that you're invested in this couple, and you have to sort of buy into the fact that they are in love. And for me, this moment has just shot it in the foot, and it didn't really ever recover from it. Because what happens is they kind of hook up and then fade to black. Then it's the middle of the night in Saigon, and he comes out and wanders the streets of Saigon having this weird moral crisis that we don't really know why. And then he kind of goes back to her, tries to give her money. She's like, why are you giving me money? I don't do this. This isn't what it's about. And he's like, really? And then she's like, oh, don't you get it? This is who I am. And tells him her story, which is devastating. This is one of those amazing musical moments where she's just pouring out her heart, and you're just like, ha. Except in this case, I was like, ooh, is that note too low for you, darling? Oops. Anyway, and then after she bears her soul, then he kind of melts, and they have a romantic moment, and he's like, you should come live with me. Don't work for the engineer, don't work at the brothel, come live with me. And it just didn't quite sit right. I think partly because she was 17 and he looks like he's 30, and partly just because of the sequence of events. And there's a very easy fix, and I'm going to tell it to you now. Because I have thought about this, and I could fix this show, so I might as well. So basically, when they go into this room, don't rip your clothes off straight away. Just have a moment that is non-sexual, that is non-romantic, that is more friendshipy. I want to think that you guys get to know each other before you just start hooking up, because that is going to convince me that everything else that happens afterwards is justified. So how about he pulls out a pack of cards and they play cards? How about he offers her a cigarette? How about so many other things that they could get into this room and then just kind of have a nice moment with it, like sitting on the bed, or she's on the bed, he's on a chair, and like they're not kissing. And then it can fade to black. And then when he creeps out in the middle of the night and wanders the streets of Saigon, having this moral crisis, maybe that moral crisis can actually mean something, because he's like, oh, why, God, why have you put me in this predicament where I'm trying to be good and like not sleep with randoms straight away, but this one is maybe more than just a random. I think I actually really like her. And then when he's sort of like done this wandering for a bit, she should be like, Chris, you left something behind, and tries to give him back this money that he's left there for her on the nightstand. And then he'd be like, no, this money's yours, just take it. And then she can be like, don't you get it? This is who I am. And then he's like, oh, this is who you are. And they can have all this moment of like getting to know each other and falling for each other before hooking up. And I think if that happened, then the rest of the show would make a lot more sense. And I think it's sort of possibly kind of written that way, but it wasn't staged that way in this production, which is ostensibly a replica production of the 25th anniversary, which did the rounds in 2014, but things take a while to get to Australia. So this is kind of that second thing kind of giving me the ick, and this is, the first half hour of the show, it's essentially a prologue, and we're about to have this big time jump of 3 years. But so far, just to recap, we've had this very kind of porny, brothely thing, which I think did not set the right tone to establish that this is a seedy, sex trafficking, gross thing. And the engineer dude running it is like opportunistic and will stop at nothing to get what he wants and does not have other people's interests at heart. And he's not a good guy. And then, there's this romance, which I just didn't really buy into and found a bit gross. And then cut to 3 years later. We see Kim basically living in the slums, basically wearing rags, and they've been separated at this point. He's back in the States, and she's singing about how, she still dreams of him and thinks that, they're connected psychically somehow. And meanwhile, he's in the States in bed dreaming, but yelling out her name. And then reveal there's another woman in the bed with him, and she starts calming him down. And we're kind of ooh, a love triangle has been established. Okay, yeah, drama, interesting. And then there's the reveal that she's got a son, and the son is Chris's. And it's oh gosh, no wonder she's so obsessed with him. I hope that he can reconnect with her and they can be a happy family and raise this child together. Wouldn't that be nice? I wonder if that will happen. Huh? Do you think? Considering this is based on a tragic opera, Madama Butterfly by Puccini. No, it's not going to happen because tragedies be tragedies. Anyways, so this is the next kind of moment that kind of gives me the ick. This child appears, and it's been 3 years, and presumably 9 months of that time was pregnancy time. And so this child must be just over 2, let's say 2.5. This is always kind of tricky when it comes to casting, right? How do you cast a 2.5-year-old and how much do you expect them to do? And, as an audience member who kind of knows what's coming, I'm always oh, is this the moment where we see a 7-year-old walk out pretending to be 2? Oh, this could be fun. And that's kind of what I've seen before, and it's a little bit awkward at first, but you know what? It's justifiable, and you get over it very quickly. But in this case, no, this child who appears literally looked like they were 2. They were tiny, and they were just kind of this sack of potatoes. They just kind of get plonked here, then they get hugged for a while, then they get plonked over there. This child was probably 3, maybe 4, and they were very compliant, but they did not look like they were having fun, and it gets really uncomfortable just watching this small child on stage who has kind of no say in things, right? How can a child that young possibly give consent to being in this giant show that has certain demands? Once curtain goes up, it's going. You've got to just go with it, right? And they did a wonderful job, this young child, but I just sort of felt sorry for them. And so all of these things combined, they could all be little things that you could kind of get over, but they all just built on top of each other, and this isn't even everything. There's more, but I got to half time and I was just like, interval, sorry, I call it half time. It's like my one attempt to pretend I'm into sports. Um, so at interval, I turned to my friend who I was with, and we were both kind of like, so... We were like, yeah, it's just a bit creepy, just like not really invested in this love story. Finding the bits with the kid kind of uncomfortable. And and the porny kind of thing, just the tone was all wrong. Okay, so those were the problematic examples of the tone not being quite right with this production. But I've got some more fun examples, and I actually wrote some things down. So, okay, so when they move in together, they have this little moment where these women come to sort of ostensibly bless the house, but it ends up that they kind of end up making it a bit more like a wedding ceremony, and it's kind of nice and romantic and sweet, and they kind of get semi-married. And then as soon as they've done that, this Vietnamese soldier dude turns up, and he's looking for Kim, and we find out that he and her were betrothed, like, as youths, and she's supposed to grow up and marry him, but her parents died and she's run away from that village, and he's tracked her down and is all like, you're going to be my wife. And it gets really tense, and people are pulling guns on each other. It's drama. And basically, it gets so tense that everyone who doesn't live there leaves. Because they're like, I've got to do the shopping. Bye. And so they leave, and then eventually the soldier dude gets chased out, and then it's just Kim kind of alone there, kind of being all agitated, and then Chris comes back into the room, and his line, I had to write it down, was, what a party that was. And the way he said it, I was just like, oh, I laughed, but I cringed. It was so awkward. It was like, what a party that was. That's like such a bad line, unless it's like played in a good way, but I guess you have to have like good actors if that's going to happen. So like, it's not, it should be done, I think, in a way that diffuses the tension, because there very obviously is a lot of tension. And if he walks in and has a moment with Kim and they look at each other and they're just like, what was that? And they're processing, and he's like, good party. Never been to one like it. Then like that could sort of diffuse the tension. But I don't know, the way he says it, it was more just like, oh, that was interesting. Oh, what a party that was. It just did not play, and it was so awkward. Another thing is, after the time jump, the 3-year thing happens, and this Vietnamese soldier dude who was at one point promised to Kim is still trying to hunt her down and find her, and he enlists the engineer to do this for him. And so the engineer is wandering around through the slums of Saigon with this like photo of her, going to people, you know, have you seen this person? Have you seen this person? Anyway, so we've just watched Kim like pouring her heart out, going, oh, Chris is out there. He's going to come find me. I believe. I still believe. And she's the only one on stage who's like awake because it's all moody nighttime. Everyone else is kind of lying there slumbering. The engineer walks into this space in a way that he would very much have seen her and noticed that she's the only one awake. And yet, instead of like A, recognizing her, or B, talking to her and saying, excuse me, have you seen this person? Oh, you are this person. He goes up to a sleeping person which makes no sense, like holds the photo out. Like, have you seen this person? And the sleeping person is just like, it was such bad acting and so funny and so stupid and so unnecessary. It's like, I'm interrupting a sleeping person to ask them where this awake person is, and they're just going to be like, they're just there, like 2 meters away. Duh, can't you see them? It's just so stupid. I was like, how am I supposed to take this seriously? This is not hitting the mark. It does not understand the tone, what it's trying to be. Okay, so those were the funny moments that made the tone deaf. Oh gosh. Act 2 opens in Bangkok, and there's another sort of like time jump, maybe, no one knows, because we're gonna come back to it, but like timeline issues. This show has timeline issues. Okay, but so we open in Bangkok, and we don't know how much time has passed, but now the engineer and Kim are there, and they're trying to make their way to America, but they've only got as far as Bangkok. And there's this opening scene where basically there's a bunch of like Thai pimps trying to get people into these seedy clubs and things, and the engineer is just one of them. And that was another moment which was so it didn't feel right. And it sort of sucks out the drama of this being a seedy situation that they are trying to escape from. Because why should they be trying to escape from it if it's so, like, cheesy and fun and cool? Anyway, found it very uncomfortable. My friend and I both came away from this production going, has this show just, like, lost its mojo? Is it past its use-by date? You know, like, maybe we just can't see this kind of thing anymore because this is a story sort of about the aftermath of the Vietnam War. It centers Vietnamese characters, and yet it's not written by Vietnamese people, so it's probably not telling their perspective properly. It just didn't work. And so I couldn't quite figure it out. I needed more time. And so I went back and I watched the filmed version of the 25th anniversary production, which is kind of the same staging, pretty much like mostly same sorts of costumes and things. This is essentially the same production, but the filmed version stars Eva Noblezada and John Bridges is the engineer, and they are both just stunning, like so good. And that film production really works. And I was like, oh, I get it now. I get all sorts of things that just weren't coming across in this Australian production. So, I'm going to talk about those now. And it was such a relief kind of to be like, oh, this show can still work. It was just a bad production. It's not the show that's the problem, okay? Because it would be a shame to like lose all this amazing music. So here's a few differences that can make it work. So what I sort of realized watching the 25th anniversary production is that the whole relationship between Kim and Chris, it's sort of a metaphor. So like, she represents Vietnam, he represents the States, and the aftermath of their relationship mirrors like the aftermath of the war. And so, you know, he's kind of gone in there, so it's really bad. He's gone in there, trying to help, trying to be a good guy, but then he just abandons her, and she's left to deal with all of the consequences, which is this child that she has to raise and stuff. And yeah, and then like, yeah, he tries to help, but kind of screws it up, and she's left trying to pick up the pieces. And then the other part of this metaphor is the engineer. So the engineer spends a lot of time singing about the American dream and dreaming about going to America. His American dream is to go to America because anyone can make anything of themselves and you're rewarded for that. And his version of the American dream is not the Willy Loman death of a salesman, 2.5 kids in a picket fence kind of American dream. The engineer's dream about America is that it represents like power and money and just materialism, commercialism. That's his American dream. And that is an interesting kind of comparison, that the phrase American dream is supposed to mean this like quaint, innocent existence, and yet his exposure to America has built this image of America just being powerful and corrupt, and he's into it. So like he'll do whatever to get to America and just be the top dog. And this is a tragedy, this story, and kind of no one wins except maybe the engineer. Like, it's not really clear what happens to him at the end, like whether he gets to America or not, but I sort of feel in my heart that he does. And that kind of is this gross thing that like he's the one who sort of stands for nothing and will just trample over anyone and use people, and he wins. And then Chris, who is trying to help but just didn't have like the know-how, he just kind of screws things up, and that's a wash. And Kim, she just kind of is sort of always the victim, and ends up taking that power into her own hands the only way she knows how, which is like, well, rather than being everyone else's victim, I'm going to be my own victim. And she ends her own story. It's really all quite heartbreaking, but I think the story works because it represents real, true, heartbreaking events. So, coming back to the engineer for a minute, watching the filmed production, John Bridges plays the engineer, and he is so menacing. And because he's just so kind of scary, so brutal. And what's interesting is that it's also a comedy role. Like, the engineer, because this world that they're in is so dramatic and so high stakes and so kind of like enough to give anyone trauma, there has to be something to cut against that and just kind of give the audience some reprieve. And the way that the show writers achieve that is by having the engineer break the fourth wall sometimes and speak directly to the audience and kind of add a little bit more lighthearted flair. And he does some things that are just really funny. But when John Bridges does these things, it's done in a way that is still kind of sinister and motivated by this, desperation and lack of morality. But yeah, I guess he makes himself the joke. And yeah, he sort of lets the audience in a wee bit. And it's just a masterclass. Honestly, the way he interprets this character is incredible. In contrast with the performer that we saw the other day, oh gosh, Sean Millie something, they had such a different take on the character, and they were trying to play everything for laughs, but I didn't find them very funny. There was just really sort of like stupid, over the top, obvious, just like very crass. Like if there was ever a chance to like, I don't know, point at someone's tits or like pretend to fart or I don't know, just any sort of scatological based humor, they would go for it, and just not in a surprising way, but just like, kiss my ass. If I say the word ass, I'm gonna point at it, and just, it was just like, ugh. I just thought it wasn't funny. It just wasn't funny. They were an incredible singer, like such a beautiful voice, and in that sense, they kind of like glued the show together. But just the tone again was so off. Like, I felt like this Melbourne production, it was like everyone was in a different show. Or it was like they hadn't been to the same rehearsals. I don't know. I found it very frustrating. So, all of this to say, save your money, stay at home and watch the filmed production of the 25th anniversary production, because it works. The story can be really powerful. The engineer can be really sinister and funny at the same time. And the songs can be very enjoyable. I made some notes. Is there anything else I wanted to say? Yeah. Just like to back up this whole kind of theory I have around the sort of like metaphor with Kim being Vietnam and Chris being the States trying to do good, and the engineer being the real sinister American power-hungry kind of thing that actually does happen rather than what they were trying to achieve. I don't think I'm imagining that. I was like, am I just trying to superimpose like some sort of theme in it that's not there? Because the production we just saw, it wasn't there. But I don't think I am superimposing that, because there's this line that Chris has at a very pivotal moment, and he is like, I'm an American, how could I fail to do good? And I was like, there it is. Yeah. That is sort of the question at the heart of it all. And it really sums up his point of view. And I was like, yeah. Sometimes you try to do good and you just end up bombing thousands of people and killing them.